Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Inner Conquest, the world's greatest modern metaphysics channel. I'm your host, Jacob Edens, and today we're going to be discussing how to give yourself internal experiences and utilize what is called the law of reversibility. So to start off with, you're always giving yourself experiences, right? So when you look at a concept that's called mental dieting, right? What does that imply? Well, what is physical dieting? Physical dieting is essentially you ingesting different foods that become you, right? So if I eat cucumbers all day, I might smell like cucumbers. Or if I eat, pot roast all day, my body's going to be comprised of pot roast, right? So what you diet, you ingest, right? And it becomes you. So when you look at the concept of a mental diet, what a mental diet essentially means is whatever you're chewing on mentally, you're going to become, right? And you're always thinking all day, every day, all the time, right? Even if you're thinking about not thinking, that is a focus point of awareness, right? So when you're focusing your awareness, you're essentially allowing yourself to intake or disidentify with thought processes. So if you have a thought, you have the ability to eat it or the ability not to eat it, right? So if you think of your mindscape almost as like a mental buffet, you have free reign or free will to choose the thoughts that you want to chew on, identify with, and or experience, right? So what happens is the reality external to us is reflecting those thoughts that we're having about ourselves consistently, right? So when people talk about going inward and essentially understanding who you are, it's understanding what you are ingesting from a mental standpoint, right? So if I have a fear of something, that's why they say a coward dies 1,000 deaths, a brave man only one. Because if you have a bad experience, you have one bad experience. But if you live in a chronic state of cowardice or chronic state of fear, all day, every day, you're rehearsing that bad scenario over and over and over again, and you're having to relive it consistently and repeatedly. So understanding your mental thought process and really dialing it in to what you want it to be is the way to become what's called a conscious creator of your life, right? Because life is essentially a bunch of experiences. And what can happen is if we're completely unaware that we have domain in our inner state, right? Our mind, our thought, emotions, and more importantly than any of that, our identity, our ability to bind with something, I am this or I am not that, then what happens is you try to outsource those experiences exclusively to your external reality, right? Oh, I need this to have this experience. I need this. Won't this be cool once I do this to have this experience, right? But remember, for negative experiences, you allow yourself to chronically have those all day, every day. So if you're having a negative experience over and over and over again, you're being self-indulgent in what you could consider a non-fulfillment reality. So if you want to shift over to a fulfillment reality, what a linear thought process would look like if you were to take that route is, well, I need to go do this, then I need to go do this, then this and this and this, and then once I have those things, I should be this, right? But all of those things, what you're really after is just the positive experience of having them, right? And you can have that experience now mentally, right? So when you look at identity shifting or making yourself into an ideal version of yourself, essentially what that identity version of yourself would experience is a certain parameter of experience, right? And so when you want to be that version of yourself, you want to get good at being someone who is able to have those experiences consistently and have it normalized, right? Because if you're an identity that never has enough money, then your experience is always one of fear and lack, and that's what you chronically dwell in from an internal standpoint, right? So when you decide to shift to a rich identity that can afford everything, you're actually having a day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience that is totally different from the version that you've been, right? And because this place has things like, you have a subconscious, you have a nervous system, you have a brain that's neuroplastic, so your physical reality echoes the habitual internal patterns that you have. When you change that internal state that you're in, you're still living in the echoes of the old state that you created for yourself externalized and expressed around you, right? So when you change, you essentially have to invert your attention from the old echoes of the past, right? You can't look at the low bank balance anymore when you decided you always have enough. You can't, be needy for a text when you decide that you have the specific person. You can't look in the mirror if you decided to change your appearance, because what you are essentially doing is becoming self-sustaining and self-fulfilling in your creative power, right? You are becoming what is essentially the primary causative point of your reality, and that you are now creating what you want to create because you like the experience of creating it, right? And what that does is it liberates you from needing external things to give yourself permission to create what you want to create. And you start creating because it's something you want to create, in the same way that if somebody gave you a paint and a brush, you would paint what you wanted to paint because it's fun to paint, right? So that's the end goal of life, is to decouple yourself from these external things that make, they don't make you do anything, but you just have a faulty belief that you need these things to embody a certain state of consciousness or state of awareness. Because even if you had a dimension of your life exactly the way you wanted it, you wouldn't be indulging in it all day, every day. You would just assume that it is the way you wanted it to be, and then when you wanted to experience it, you would go experience it the way you wanted it to be, like watching a movie, right? So any dimension of your life is really like that, in that you want to really get good at using your internal interplay to craft and cultivate yourself into the version that you want to be, who's having these experiences that they want to have, just because it is entertaining for you, right? Because that's the game that you're playing. And once you understand that you can disidentify with any thought process, emotion, or anything that your current reality is reflecting to you, because you understand that that was just simply a binding agreement for a set parameter of experience that you agreed to, right? And so why do you agree to experiences? Well, you don't agree with written contracts or these other things. You agree to experiences by being aware of them, accepting them as true for you, and identifying with them. So those three things consent you to a specific reality that, if you consent to in your personal reality, will play out more and more for you. For example, right? You see people online who are always like, men are always like this, or women are always like this. So they've had an experience, they've seen the reality, they've accepted that that is true for them, and they become the identity that allows that to happen to them, and they don't contradict it and or deny it and or rehearse an alternative reality internal space long enough for it to essentially reflect, right? So when you think about rehearsing an internal reality space that's the way you wanted it to be, what you would want to consider is what is fun, right? And it's not from a, childlike, everything has to be fun. Well, why not if you get to create everything? But from a consistency standpoint, if you play a phone game for a couple hours, look at why you played the phone game. It's fun, right? So if you want to be chronically dwelling in an ideal state of consciousness or ideal state of awareness, think about thinking as if you were the person you wanted to be in a fun, engaging, enlightening, intelligent, engaging way. Think about all of the fun aspects of it. Start to train yourself to get dopamine hits from doing your internal imaginative acts the way that you want them to be, in the same way that if you played a game, your guy would get little points for doing the right actions. Think of all of the accurate thought processes that would implicate yourself as the ideal version of yourself, whether it be wealth, health, finances, or whatever, and then make an internal game of seeing yourself doing things that are really fun, that are in alignment with you being that ideal version of self. And as you, in the same way, addict yourself to unwanted thought processes, non-fulfillment states, states that imply you're not who you want to be and you don't have what you want to have, you can addict yourself to these wanted states just as easily, but you have to consciously make the decision to do that self-sustaining internal practice without having any type of external validation, because the external world cannot prove anything to you until it is solidified and crystallized in your own inner being, right? So what happens is because this place you fall asleep, you come in here and you see a bunch of negative circumstances, and they're easy to accept because they've already been formed, right? And when they're already formed, you form your own opinions about them, which recreate them over and over and over again. If there's such a thing as karma, that's all it is. Karma is just another word for action. So you see all the actions that have been taken, and then you go, oh, this must be how it is, because in this place you forget that you have that internal creative power, right? But as you quote unquote reawaken, you wake up in the movie and you realize that you have that creative power, and then you can start exercising that creative power on behalf of your own volition and your own decision-making process. And you can really be grateful for the past experiences that you had, because they provide so much contrast that it can give you massive amounts of clarity on how you want to design your optimal life, which, you know, life is a game. So design your optimal game, if you will. Because if you're here to play a game, then you're here to play your game, and you're here to play it the way that you want to play it, but without, you know, the gas gauge telling you that it's on empty every now and then, you don't know to go fill up your car. So every negative circumstance is really just like that empty gas gauge saying, hey man, this could use some revision. This could use some intentional creative thought around how this could be a dynamic or engaging opportunity that would bring value to your life or your game, right? So you look at it through that lens, and nothing can hurt you anymore, because it's just a valuable data feedback point that, if properly reconfigured, will give you essentially an expansion and or an upgrade to your life. So I know you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave future topics in the comments that you'd like to see. Additionally, the link tree has all of my coaching. So if you want to do one-on-one sessions, or you want to do one of the protocols, there's the Modern Metaphysics protocol, which has all the basics, and then the Spartan 1 Human Optimization protocol if you are more entrepreneurial, athletic, and things of that nature. So hope you guys have a great day, and more important than any of that, go conquer. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.